So we have one of the more significantly Catholic readings for our gospel today. Peter as the rock on which Jesus builds his church, possessing the keys to heaven and earth. And for the longest time, that imagery always puzzled me. The keys of the church. But as luck would have it, I read something interesting recently on that, in that a key is actually a very appropriate symbol for the Catholic Church. Because a key is a tool which is defined entirely by its shape. The shape is what lets the key work. And no other tool is entirely like that. A hammer can be big or small. A screwdriver has a certain room for error about it. A ratchet needs to be a certain size and shape, but they're interchangeable. One ratchet is as good as any other, whereas a key is only good for one lock and vice versa. And finally, a key is good for one thing. It only does one thing. It unlocks the lock on the door. That is the Catholic Church in a nutshell. Just as a key is precise, it needs just the right amount of teeth in just the right places, the Church's teachings are very exact. All right, it's got to have absolute divinity and humanity. It's got to take into account sin and forgiveness without being pessimistic about the former or cheap about the latter. It has to take into account free will without cutting out divine providence. So the Church can't overemphasize or underemphasize anything. It is, in the end, a very precise tool. And like a key, the Church has one job: opening the door to salvation. And that's the salvation of all of creation, I might add. That is what the Church does. If the Church is doing something that in no way forwards the cause of salvation and redemption, then it's doing something that it shouldn't be doing. It's probably attempting to do something that it was never meant to do in the first place. And finally, like a key, the Church is necessary because there is a lock on that door. That is to say, the door of salvation would be closed without that thing that was built upon the faith of Peter. So what would that be? If the key is the Church and the door is salvation, our destiny, what exactly is the lock? Well, the answer is original sin. Okay? Original sin is the answer to that question. The door of salvation was totally open to Adam and Eve before the apple. And if that never happened, if sin never entered into the world, the Church would not exist. There would be no purpose at all. I mean, I heard that explicitly in seminary. They looked us in the eye and said in black and white terms, guys, you are being trained as priests because sin is real and it must be combated with faith, with prayer, and with the sacraments. So I want to talk just a little bit more about that lock on the door, original sin. Because every once in a while I'll meet a certain kind of person, normally a very lapsed Catholic. But the sort of person that says, oh, no, I really like the Catholic Church. I just don't agree with what you guys say about Jesus or the presence of the Holy Spirit or the necessity of the unity of faith in the sacraments, the authority of the Pope, or the reality of original sin. And so, of course, the only real response is, oh, is that all? But every once in a while, when I'm feeling snarky, I'm feeling snarky a lot, actually. I don't respond that way, and my response always throws them off a little bit. I let them have their whole tirade, and then I go, really? You don't believe in original sin? And that always throws them off, because it's not the detail they're expecting me to fixate on. They're probably expecting me to just yell at them about the Pope for a while. But really, that's the most absurd part of their statement. So I say, really? You don't believe in original sin? Have you gone outside today? Sin is all around us, all right? when you say you don't believe in original sin, you're saying that there's a fighting chance that a person will go their entire life without sinning once. You're saying that salvation is achievable on our own without God because it's within human reach. No, that is not true. It is not within ordinary human reach because the opportunity to sin is all around us. We are saturated by it, which is a word which here means soaked or charged thoroughly and completely. It's important that we understand that as Catholics about what original sin is and is not, because original sin is not sin. All right, it's not sin in the typical sense of the word, because sin is simply turning away from God somehow. All right, sinning is a personal act that you are responsible for, whether, even if it's only in your thoughts, your desires. No matter what, the heart of the action of sin resides in the heart of man, in his free will. That is a line directly from the Catechism, by the way. If there is absolutely no free will at work, then it is not a sin. Genuine mistakes are not sins, nor are thoughts or desires that just pop in outside of your control. You are not responsible for those things. You must turn away from God somehow in order for sin to be real. So please, don't do this. Don't go to the confessional and say, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 1 month since my last confession. I am guilty of original sin. Please have mercy." Don't do that. Because you're saying the exact same thing as, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 1 month since my last confession. I was born and I'm alive. For these and all the sins of my life, please have mercy." Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't confess being alive. Don't confess original sin. That is not a sin. I can't absolve you of being alive, even if you're alive in a sinful world, because it involves an act of free will turning against God. Original sin is simply the term we use to describe humanity's fallen nature. The fact that each and every one of us is naturally inclined to sin, even though we know it's wrong. That's what original sin is, and that's the lock on the door. And wouldn't you know it, I've got a fresh example all set for you from last week. Some of you know I was on vacation last week, went to Indianapolis to see some of my friends, and the big thing is we have this huge event that we do. It's 60 people, it's 18 hours over 3 days, that's 6 hours a day. We look forward to this all year. And this year, it didn't go the way I expected it. There was a lot of wasted time, which always annoys me. There was a lot of yelling and a lot of disrespect. So as I'm watching this and experiencing this, I'm getting grumpier and grumpier, and I'm getting more and more irritated and agitated. So my frustration is building up until it explodes, because that's what happens when I'm in that sort of environment for too long. And as luck would have it, when that inevitable time of my explosion happened, I snapped around a woman who suffers from panic attacks. Yeah, she had some tough experiences earlier in life, and she can't handle being around angry men. Yeah, so she kind of shut down for a while. She lost a certain ability to interact socially with other people, at least for a time. Now, don't worry, we're all still friends. We all understood we weren't at our best. This is not anything terribly unusual. You're not going to find this on the front page of the Indiana newspaper or anything. But the reason I'm saying this story is because there is actual sin and original sin at work. The actual sin was me acting on my anger and causing actual psychological harm to an innocent person. That is sin. I am responsible for that. And when I was notified of what happened when I got home, you better believe I gave her a call and apologized and cleared the air, which she appreciated. The original sin is more like that environment of 18 hours with 60 people crammed in a room. Tensions were high. There was disrespect all around. It was only a matter of time before someone somewhere did something that they would regret later on. That is not a sin because an environment can't sin. Only a person can sin. But even though it's not a sin, it is proof of humanity's fallen nature. It is proof that this unending cycle of hurt and pride continues. The world is a broken and hurtful place, and the worst of it is what we dish out to one another. So you might say that original sin is that pattern of unending hurt and pride that we're all a part of, whether we want it or not. So when someone says that they don't believe in original sin, they either don't understand what the term means, or they've never left their house and don't have internet. For all of this, the church is the key. The church is absolutely the key. Christ did not come for the sake of the righteous, but for the sake of sinners. And he got us started with his earthly ministry, his death, and his resurrection. But that's not enough. It's not enough because if it was, the Holy Spirit would never have descended upon the apostles at Pentecost. The Holy Spirit came to us that day because there is work yet to be done. Christ did the hard part, the part that required actual divinity. We are called to do the rest. We are called to proclaim the good news to all of creation. We are called to remind everyone that God is still with us and that the prince of this world, the devil, is not the all-powerful master he would lead us to believe. The rules of this world do not chain our hands and feet. The opportunity to sin, which saturates the very air we breathe, does not enslave our souls. The very best that it can do is put a lock on the door. And we have the key. God personally walked up and handed it to us. The key is made of faith, hope, and love, and it's shaped by dogma, doctrine, tradition, and truth.